Hey, Joel, good morning.
I just greeted you and realized I was muted. How's it going, Edgar?
Good. Good to hear you and see you all. Thanks for joining. We'll hang out here for a little bit longer and check in with our panelists and then see who gets to join us.
Hi, Jamylah.
Hey, how are you?
Good. Hi, Zoe.
Hello. What's all happening? Why?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Great. Been having wonky speakers all day.
My cursor keeps circling, and that makes me very nervous. I don't know why. What are you trying to do?
Hi, Madeleine.
Hi, Joel. How are you?
Good.
Hi.
Hi.
The moment of reckoning is upon us.
Looks like Amy's still running into some issues.
Did she send an email? Another one?
She just sent a Teams message.
Edgar, Amy was saying that it was asking her to re-register when she clicked on the link.
It shouldn't. Let me Teams her the invite, I guess.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hi.
Oh,
I just wanted to check with the panelists really quickly. Do y'all have the ability to share as panelists?
Dr.
You should be
Silberbogen is
able
still
to if you
struggling.
hit share screen.
Mine says it's disabled. I don't plan to share anything, but I just tried and got a host disabled participant screen sharing.
I'm sorry, for some reason my computer went on mute all of a sudden. Can you say that one more time?
Sure. I don't plan to share anything, but when I try it here, it says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay. Edgar, I think you're logged in as yourself, right?
I am currently logged in as myself, yes.
Okay. Could you try and log in? Well, I'll log in as the Zoom administrator. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
Oh, hey, Shiloh.
Hey, sorry. Oh, I need to mute myself, so I'm not just.
Edgar, were you able to find Amy?
I'm back channeling
Okay.
with her. It says that it keeps asking her to re-register.
Yeah, Jamylah, am I even in this thing?
No, yeah, you are.
Okay. Because I got your message. Don't worry, you're not on it. I'm like,
Like, really? Because I thought I was.
okay.
So this is a good time to ask, what is the definitive list of order that we're going in?
It's
Oh,
a solid
Jamie.
question, Joel. It's a
Jamylah's in charge.
I'm in charge. I'm in charge. Let me look. Where's the flyer? We can go on list of that.
Yeah, I've got it pulled up here and I can share my screen and we can kind of go through it. That way people know who's coming up, and it has a little bit of a blurb in terms of who y'all are. So you're welcome to
Hey.
introduce yourselves. That way we're not reading to people who you are. Amy, I'm so glad you made it.
I know, I don't know what's going on. I've never had that happen before. I was in this perpetual cycle of registration.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we're set to go. I'm looking at the virtual room here. I think we've got everybody that we need. It looks like Jeremy, you're set to go and the recording is in place.
I'm seeing the recording in place, yes. And also panelists, you all should be able to share now.
Oh yeah. Let's see.
All right.
I could share if I were so inclined.
Well, we are in business then. Then I'll get us started with my introduction, and then I'll hand it over to Jamylah. You're going to be up first, and I'll share my screen here so folks get to see who is on our panel. And then Jeremy, if you could hang out near the end, we'll close out with some announcements for the upcoming webinars. So just wanted to give you that heads up. So good morning, good afternoon, depending on what part of the world you're joining us from. Really glad to be here with y'all today. My name's Edgar Villarreal. Again, I'm the chair for the VA section of Division 18, and really being glad to be here with y'all today for today's webinar series on how to get a VA Postdoctoral Fellowship. I wanted to thank really all of our panelists that are here with us today. This is something that we host on a yearly basis in partnership with our VA Psychology Training Council. Well, folks have an opportunity to come here and be able to learn about VA postdocs and why they're great and why you should consider applying for them, and have ready access to some of our great VA psychology training leaders from across the VA to be able to answer your questions and help hopefully encourage you and guide you through that process. So that being said, I'm going to hand it over to our panelists, as you see there in front of you, and have them introduce themselves. So thank you all again for being here with us today.
Hi, everyone. Let me see. I don't see any muting issues going on. My name is Jamylah Jackson. I'm the chair of the VA Psychology Training Council and Deputy Associate Chief of Staff for Education Service at the Dallas VA. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what is postdoctoral training and just kind of lay the foundation a little bit. And then from there, I will kick it over to Dr. Goodkind, who will talk about diversity in the VA. And then we will move to Dr. Proctor-Weber, who will talk a little bit about the range of competitiveness and how to consider different programs. From there, we will move into the importance of fit. That will be discussed by Dr. Jordan. And last but not least, we will have Dr. Joel Schmidt, who's going to talk with us a little bit about the advanced fellowships, and then Dr. Silberbogen, who will talk about the role of APIC and the common hold date, which is hot and new. We want to spend some time making sure everybody's clear on how it operates. So to kick us off, let's talk a little bit about the purpose of postdoctoral training. So initially, postdoctoral training historically has really been about accruing additional hours for licensure. Starting about 12 years ago, though, the APA published the Model Licensing Act that was in 2010 that really highlighted the fact that for entry-level practice, in theory, when you receive your doctorate, you should be ready for practice. And so there are several states that have run with that since that time, about 15 to 18 states or so, where you don't need postdoctoral hours in order to get a license. But as an outgrowth of that act, it really forced APIC and APA to take a hard look at what is the role of postdoctoral training. If it's not something that is necessarily going to be required across the board for everyone. And so really the focus has been about developing specialty skills, specialty training, in addition to accruing hours for those licensing boards that do require postdoctoral hours. Really, the focus of a postdoctoral fellowship is not as much about just accruing hours as much as it is about getting additional training experience, getting additional expertise or competency in a particular area of specialization. And that specialization might be a focus on delivering care for individuals with a particular diagnosis, so maybe substance abuse emphasis or trauma emphasis or primary care emphasis or things like that. But the role of postdoctoral training really is to help our young and budding psychologists develop additional skills beyond that of just kind of the basic clinical proficiency that we are all aspiring for folks to have. So when you're thinking about training in the VA, one of the reasons why you might consider a VA postdoctoral fellowship, there are numerous, but one is the commitment to education and training. One of the really nice things about training in a VA context is that there isn't a focus on billable hours. The focus really is on ensuring that you have the best clinical experiences to ensure that you're enhancing your skills. So the VA has had a touch in training most psychologists in the country. I think the numbers are 70% of practicing psychologists have had some VA experience or training. So it's one of the core pillars of VA and something that the VA does really well and really spends a lot of effort and money and investment overall in providing training to the next generation of clinicians. The VA also really emphasizes measurement-based care. And so there's a big focus on experience with evidence-based practice, ensuring that science is really driving and helping to guide the decisions that clinicians are making clinically. So training in VA means that you'll have access to learning about all the latest and greatest evidence-based psychotherapies for a very wide range of clinical presentations. So PTSD, substance abuse, insomnia, depression, pain, couples work, it goes on and on. So whatever clinical areas of expertise you're interested in, you can feel very confident that if you're training at a VA site, you're going to have access to the latest and greatest in terms of providing evidence-based care for that particular population and working with providers that are trained in the latest and greatest. The VA does a number of evidence-based therapy rollouts and has a number of nationally trained staff. So oftentimes within the staff are people that are really national experts in providing care in a variety of different areas. The VA provides really diverse clinical training experiences, particularly when you're thinking about interprofessional care. One of the nice things about working within a VA clinical team is that you're going to have access to working with a number of different types of professionals and understanding the role of a psychologist within a broader team and the role that a psychologist can play in helping to craft the treatment plan of an interdisciplinary group, as well as understanding how different disciplines approach their clinical work and approach their perspectives based on their varied backgrounds and training. Public service, if you're interested in social justice and public service, VA is a great place to work. There are many patients within VA who are coming from underserved populations. And so because they might not have the economic resources to seek services elsewhere, you really do have an opportunity to make a difference with individuals who have often risked all kinds of things, life and limb, in the name of their service, and have very unique and varied experiences in terms of what's driving their clinical presentations. In VA, you also get to see the multiple roles that a psychologist can play. There are folks on the call today who work in all kinds of different positions, whether those are leadership roles, primarily clinical roles, working within a medical center, working within central office. There are a number of ways that that psychologists contribute to the VA milieu writ large. And so it's really a cool experience, I think, to be able to see the different ways that you can be a psychologist, whether that's working in research or consultation or any other different kinds of roles that you can have. If you're interested in working in the VA long-term, then a VA postdoc can be particularly helpful in helping you to understand kind of the culture of VA and make some connections. The VA is large, but it's also very small. So you'd be surprised how often people that you've trained with or worked with in some capacity will come back into your life down the line, and who knows who. So it's a really great opportunity to start learning more about VA culture and the staff. And last but not least, funding. The VA pays their trainees and they pay them with regularity. Funding is not variable. All of our fellowships are funded by the Office of Academic Affiliations. That funding is stable. It is unchanging unless it goes up, it periodically changes due to cost of living and things like that. But the funding is stable, which cannot necessarily be said for every organization, particularly if their training stipends or funding is based on grants or other kind of fluctuating funding sources. So that's the gist of what a postdoc might be in VA. From here, I'll turn it over to Dr. Goodkind, who will talk a little bit about diversity in the VA.
Thank you, Jamylah. My name is Madeleine Goodkind. I am the training director at the New Mexico VA, where we have an internship and 3 postdoc programs. And so our internship is also a consortium, so I can speak to a little bit about VA versus working with other organizations as well. I think there is this conception that that VA patients are very homogenous, i.e. primarily older white men. But in fact, what we see within the VA is that the VA serves an incredibly wide range of ages. I've worked with veterans in their late teens and 20s up into their 80s and 90s. And we have a large percentage of women veterans coming in. You see a lot of variability in terms of ethnic and racial backgrounds, ability at groups and identities. And when people come and do a training year within the VA, they have the opportunity to work with people who are coming in from a lot of backgrounds and coming in with a lot of different care needs. One of the things that Jamylah mentioned is that the VA is a very large organization. And I think the psychology training program within that, because it's so strong and so robust, we have a lot of benefits of that. So we have over about 120 fellowships within the VA and additional research fellowships. And within this, we're able to share a lot of the resources so that we're able to train larger groups of people and not kind of reinvent the wheel. This community of resources, I think, makes individual programs stronger. That's certainly been the case for our program. I look to other programs around the country frequently to develop our own training materials. Multicultural training is one of VA's really primary priorities. I think within the last couple of years, many of the events that we as a country have faced that have brought to the fore the need to improve our training and sensitivity has really improved the kind of trainings that now we have available within the VA. As I mentioned, the VA serves a very diverse population in terms of a number of identities, including age, ethnicity, ability, military culture, SES, LGBTQ status, gender, rural populations, providing a ton of telemental health at this point. And my experience is that this was my experience as a trainee, and then my experience in working with trainees is that they're often surprised at the breadth of training experiences and populations that are available when they come to the VA. Because the VA provides comprehensive care, there are not just the opportunities to work with a lot of different populations, but to do a lot of different kind of work, from outpatient work to residential to palliative care and everything in between. And trainees at the VA have the opportunities to work with trainees and staff around the country. So Within the VA, there are a lot of opportunities to join committees and work groups so that you can work with people not just at your own VA. This is certainly the case with a number of the people here on this call with me, where we are piloting different opportunities for our trainees to work using virtual meetings with trainees at other facilities as well. There are a number of different resources and support within, sort of formalized within the VA psychology training programs. We have a quarterly diversity consultation call that's focused on a number of different topics, from race-based stress and trauma to religion and spirituality and mental health and cultural competence within multidisciplinary teams. And I think this is a chance for trainees within the VA, regardless of their particular site, to get involved with really top-notch trainings that are available. Within our VA PTC SharePoint, which has just a tremendous amount of materials, that's where we keep a lot of the modules that are then available to training directors and supervisors across the VA, so that they're sort of created by one of our work groups within the VA PTC and then available to training directors and supervisors everywhere, so that people can be up to date on the sort of most modern training opportunities that are there. When it comes to putting together your interview and your application, putting together your application and preparing for interviews, some of the things to take into account are that it's important to talk about your own cultural variables and identities and how this impacts your thinking and your work with clients, to demonstrate knowledge of your stimulus value, as well as your ability to reflect on what you're bringing into the room and how it interacts with the people you're working with. Be prepared to talk about cultural factors with respect to case and professional interactions. So this could be in clinical interactions and interactions with supervisors. So you're talking about, again, not just the client and their stimulus value, but your own. And one of the things that I found across training programs is that self-awareness and self-reflection is really highlighted and focused within our VA training programs. And so be prepared to talk about that and reflect on that when you're coming for interviews for VA postdocs. I'm happy to answer more questions, and I think we'll get to that period later. But overall, if you're interested and passionate about diversity, my experience has been that the VA is a really great place to get some of your training.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
We will kick it over to Dr. Proctor-Weber.
Hello, interns. Yes, I'm Zoe Proctor-Weber. I am a training director in sunny Florida at the Bay Pines VA. And what I'm going to talk with you today about is decision-making. What range of programs should you apply to? Well, the good news is the market is generally pretty good. There is a lot of supply, which certainly is in your benefit. Of course, across areas, supply and demand can fluctuate. And the best general strategy for market uncertainty of any kind is to diversify your applications. So what I generally tell my interns is, in decision-making, you're going to need to figure out what you can be flexible about and what's a deal breaker for you uniquely. The first thing that you might want to consider is geography. Can you be flexible in your choice of where to live and where to take on your next year or two of training? The more flexibility you have with respect to location, the better your odds of securing a postdoc. Now, some geographic locations are going to get more applications than other places. So one place that you can look is the UPPD directory or even the site brochure, and see how many applications that particular training site, that particular program gets annually. You'll want to factor that into your decision making. The VA has been actively developing training programs in more rural, smaller locations. This is really just to help create professional pipelines. So consider geographically out of the way places if you can. An additional year of training in the VA is absolutely going to set you up to be extremely competitive for the job market. And that's just in 12 months. You're really investing in your future self. Another thing to consider is the program's area of focus or specialty. So like location, training for very specific careers can range in terms of how competitive they are. Is this an area that you can be flexible in? And this decision is going to tie into your ultimate career goals. If your goal is to practice in a specialty that requires very specific training, like neuropsychology or geropsychology, you may not be able to be flexible in the type of program. But maybe you can be more flexible in choice of location. Or on the other side, if you're open to a larger variety of training, different populations, different programs, different types of interventions, but you have ties to a certain city, then can you be more flexible in what your generalist training looks like? And I will say it is a good time to be seeking a postdoc. The number of postdocs has increased, so your odds have increased. And this is especially true with good preparation and potentially some geographic flexibility. Now, generally, the questions that I get are, well, how competitive am I? And how many postdocs? What's the magic number? Well, this isn't internship, and that's a hard question. It's very individualized. I would encourage you to have some conversations with your advisors, your internship training director, even classmates that are a year or two ahead of you. But generally speaking, you do not need to apply to as many postdocs as you did internship. It's a very different process. I think lastly, I would suggest that you tier your applications. You know, apply to a couple of training sites that meet every single checkbox, you know, dream site in terms of location or focus or specialty. But then also apply to a couple that would require a little bit more flexibility on your part, maybe in terms of location or the program, maybe the population or intervention or assessment opportunities, and any other factors that are really important to you. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you very much. We transition over to Dr. Jordan.
Hi, all. I'm going to springboard a little bit off of what Dr. Proctor-Weber had just described and have you all really think about goodness of fit. So postdoc is different than internship in that even the volume of applicants that a site is looking at look different. So there's an opportunity to get to individually know you as an applicant better, and it's also an opportunity for you to get to know the site a little bit better. And it's transitioning out of the mindset of needing to do something in order to achieve the degree to really self-reflecting on what is it that I hope to gain from the experience and what is this type of site and the setting and the specialty training or advanced skill set training in an emphasis area that's going to springboard my career. So it's less of thinking about where do I want to be a year from now and more about where does this experience lead me 5 years from now. And that doesn't mean knowing exactly what we want to do 5 years from now, but it is about thinking about the skill set and the professional development and the types of areas that you really want to grow in within a postdoc. And once you know that, it's then easier to look at an individual site and think about, is that the type of setting and site and faculty and environment that's going to be a good fit and help me expand upon those areas and kind of what I describe as come alive. And that's different for everybody. Some people really thrive in a smaller medical center, and some people really come alive in a very large, robust system in an urban area. And so it's thinking beyond needing to do the next step. And really, I encourage stopping and self-reflecting on what is it really that I want to grow in? What is it that I really hope to gain? And how does this kind of lead to more opportunities down the road? So thinking about just what is the type of specialty or advanced skill set? Does that site offer it? What kind of employment positions am I interested in? And does this postdoc help me be more prepared for those? And how does that kind of not just the clinical experience that I'll gain, but what is the professional development I'll also be able to gain within the postdoc setting that really I think can be underestimated, but highly, highly valuable. And what are the values and priorities of the program? Is it a scientist practitioner model? Is research going to be involved in the postdoc? Is that something that is of high interest to me? To what extent is that going to be an active part of the postdoc experience? If it's an area that I'm less experienced in, is this an opportunity for me to expand that skill set? Or is it really at such an advanced skill set level that it's really not going to match what my career trajectory is, or what my is a best way to build off of my background? And if you're going to apply to more than one emphasis area at any particular site, it's really important that you maximize the cover letter as an opportunity to explain kind of why you're interested in the program and why particular emphasis areas. So if you're applying for all emphasis areas at a setting, it doesn't help the program understand exactly why the program and why an emphasis area unless you further expand upon that in your cover letter. It can come across as just wanting to be in the geographical area or at that facility versus wanting a particular training experience, which is particularly important when you think about postdoc, because it is designed to develop a specialty or advanced skill set. And really to think about that, as much as you're interviewing at sites, you're also interviewing to see kind of what makes sense for you. It's an important investment of a year or 2 years of your life, depending on the postdoc or advanced fellowship. And you really want to think about what is the values of the program, how much is training driven versus workload driven, what are the experiences available, how are they built in the postdoc, what are flexibilities in learning plan, how does that match with your own needs and interests, what are the resources of the program, what are some access to other community activities, what's the overall learning environment of the setting. And so really pay attention to not just the mindset of getting through another year or treating it like a year to get hours for licensure, but really thinking about an opportunity to springboard and really invest in yourself and your future career development. And how does that fit in your personal and professional intersection in a way that maybe on internship we were less focused on because we just wanted to get our degrees at the end of the day and be able to get through that. This is an opportunity to really use your wise mind to think about your passions and interests and needs, as well as kind of how that moves you forward in future career planning as well. And that's all, Jamylah.
Are you sure? All right, sounds good. Why don't we kick it over to Dr. Schmidt, who's going to talk a little bit about advanced fellowships.
Great, thanks so much. It's really great to be here, part of this panel. So I'm Joel Schmidt. I'm the Associate Director of Advanced Fellowships for the Office of Academic Affiliations. I also happen to have a history of being a training director at VA Northern California for 13 years. So I want to just take a few minutes and talk about our advanced fellowship programs because they're a little bit off the beaten path, but they can provide some really great training opportunities for psychologists. So just a quick overview, we have 21 different programs at 50 different facilities across the country. And they focus on areas of either specialized clinical service delivery, such as addictions, psychosocial rehabilitation, women's health, geriatrics, traumatic brain injury, among others. Or they focus on specialized skills, such as health services research, quality improvement, data science, system redesign. So a lot of the research training happens within our section. One thing to mention about advanced fellowships is they actually started as physician training programs. And that's important because just because they're set up a little bit differently than our traditional psychology postdoctoral fellowships. Most of them now take psychologists, and not all of them, but most of them do. The programs, some are 1 year, but most are 2 years. And especially the ones that are really focused on developing research skills and a research career, given that that's the amount of time typically you need to complete projects and be a competitive grant writer, et cetera. And so for those of you that are thinking about research, I wanted to mention that you might be thinking about the VA, or you might be thinking about academic medical centers. So the pitch I want to make for VA is that we are by far the largest integrated healthcare system in the country. And if you want to be a health services researcher and actually have an impact, then you need to have your work implemented. And I think doing it within a system such as the VA will give you a much better chance for that to happen than if you do it at an independent medical center. So just a consideration, I think, is a unique benefit for doing your research training in VA. I want to mention, though, again, I can go back to what I said a minute ago, that these programs initially did not start as psychology training programs because you have to be a little bit of an extra cautious consumer and make sure that the programs are set up for licensing. And most of them are, but obviously getting your psychology license is very important during the postdoctoral year. So as you go through the process of considering an advanced fellowship, you want to make sure that that particular site is set up to provide you that. And again, most of them are, but I just want to make sure that that's important, that you understand that that's an important question to ask as you're moving through the process. So our biggest fellowship is called Mental Illness Research and Treatment. We have that at 28 sites, and this is a very popular one. Again, for those that want to do a kind of a research-focused career, but with a clinical, strong clinical component as well. So other large ones, we have Health Services Research at 14 sites. We have Advanced Geriatrics and Women's Health. Those are pretty big ones. Psychosocial Rehabilitation is another big one that I want to just take a minute and talk about. So that's a one-year clinically focused fellowship, but it's very interprofessional, and it gives you a lot of skills in becoming a clinical leader. So you learn the clinical skills, but you also learn working in a team, being a leader in this really important area of psychosocial rehabilitation. And then another large one we have is addiction treatment. So those are all programs that that many psychologists participate in. Psychology is by far is one of our bigger professions now too, even though initially we started with just physicians. So there's been a lot of really good penetration among psychologists into our interprofessional fellowships. And then one more I'd mention is Quality Scholars. It's another program that's pretty large, and it's been a very successful program for psychologists wanting to learn quality improvement skills within the VA healthcare system. In terms of finding our fellowships, I'm going to put a few documents in the chat once I'm finished talking, and one of them is a set of links that we all put together that will get you a list, it will teach you how to get to all the VA fellowships in all the sections, and as well as some APIC resources and so forth. So it's kind of a nice one-stop shopping for how to find VA fellowships, including the advanced fellowships. I'm also going to put a couple of other documents about advanced fellowships in the chat. So one is kind of just it tells you about all the programs in a little bit more detail. And then also there's a spreadsheet that shows you where our fellowships are located, just to give you a sense, because I'm sure that's a consideration for you. So on that list of links that I mentioned, there's our Advanced Fellowships webpage, and you can drill down to any program at any facility and find some contact information, which is often the best way to pursue an advanced fellowship. Is just reach out directly to the program director at the site that you're interested in and ask them more questions about how does this work and what's the application process. Because it is, again, it's more individualized. It's kind of less formal in some ways than some of the other fellowships. So I think that's just important to understand, that you have to do a little bit of extra, take a few extra steps in order to find these. But again, I hope that you will, because it's a great training opportunities. So I think that's all that I wanted to say. Thanks again for the time, and I'm happy to answer any questions when we get to the end if there's additional questions people would like to discuss.
Thank you very much. And with that, we will transition to Dr. Silberbogen, who's going to talk with us a little bit about the common holding.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me here today. I'm Amy Silberbogen. I currently serve on the APIC Board of Directors, and I'm the board liaison to the APIC Postdoc Committee. And in my day job, I serve as the training director of the VA Boston Psychology Postdoctoral Fellowship Program. I have a bit of a cold, so I'm hoping I can get through this without a coughing attack, but I'll rely on my co-panelists to jump in if needed. So I'm here really to talk about the transition from the APIC uniform notification date to the APIC postdoctoral selection standards with common hold date. So APIC's been involved in organizing postdoctoral selection for about 6 years now. And I want you all to be aware of this because information that may be passed down to you from those currently on postdoc or from internship training directors who are not in the know may misguide you a bit. And so it's great that you're here so you can learn for yourself. Of relevance to VA postdocs, all VA clinical programs are required to follow the selection standards with common hold date, with the additional caveat that programs cannot start interviewing prior to January 1st. So you may be wondering why APIC decided to rework the selection processes, and certainly why during your year couldn't they have waited a year. And in short, while the previous mechanism, which was called the uniform notification date, worked very well, particularly for applicants, it did come with a good deal of stress for all, for applicants and for training directors. And more programs, not necessarily VA programs, were not abiding by the guidelines over time, creating increasing challenges for applicants. And because the underlying tenet of the UND, or the uniform notification date, was that you could not make an offer until mid-February, lots of programs just would not abide. So here we are, things are shifted. We're now following the APIC postdoctoral selection standards with common hold date. And the way the document that Joel just popped into the chat provides a link directly to the APIC webpage. And if you hover over postdoc, you can get directly to the selection standards. And they're broken down by applicants and programs and kind of the expectations for each group. And the way this is going to work this year is that programs are able to make offers upon completing interviews. No offer date is defined, but it is expected that it would be within a few weeks of the common hold date, which is February 27th, 2023. Programs are able to extend as many offers as they have available positions, and offers are considered binding until that date, the common hold date. If an applicant receives an offer and accepts it, the program will immediately notify all other applicants that that position is no longer available. And if the offer is declined, the program can immediately extend the offer to its next ranked applicant. Programs and applicants have open communication, so they can definitely check in with each other. Programs can check in if an applicant is holding an offer. However, they cannot solicit ranking information from applicants. They cannot attempt to gauge the likelihood of an applicant accepting an offer or pressure an applicant. On the applicant side of things, for you all, you'll get, the way you'll receive an offer is typically, you might get a preliminary phone call, but the official offer will come through over email. And the expectation is that you respond to that within 24 hours. If you don't respond to the email, just to say, hey, I got this email, or and I accept, or I decline, or I hold, within 24 hours, the program can move on to the next available applicant. So when you receive that offer, you can accept it if you know it's your top choice. You can decline it if you have something else brewing, or you can hold the offer until the common hold date of February 27th. If you hold an offer, you are obligated to then withdraw from all lower ranked programs. So those programs can then cross you off their list and be free to consider other applicants. Applicants can certainly check in at that time with higher ranked programs about their status. And then when accepting an offer, you should then withdraw from all other programs. The idea is that there'll be this cascading acceptance and declination of offers that happens so that most programs and applicants will find their maximum pairing prior to the common hold date. We expect that there will be a little bit of activity on the common hold date, but that most people will find a match for their postdoc prior to that time. For those of you who haven't had an opportunity to hear too much about the APIC common hold date, we have done a good amount of education. We've had some webinars, we have a narrated PowerPoint, lots of educational resources up on the APIC webpage. We're also planning a applicant forum for January 18th, which I think will go out in a very, very soon email blast where you can ask follow-up questions. I think a lot of the questions we had in the forum were really about getting the lay of the land. And by mid-January, you'll have the lay of the land. You'll have gone on some interviews, and you may have some additional questions. And so our plan is to have APIC is sponsoring a forum to really address any of those questions at that time. So just a few things to go over. How do you know if a program is following the APIC postdoctoral selections? This should be in their UPPD listing. Programs that are not following the standards will be flagged. Should also be in public materials, and you can also ask. If a program doesn't know about the standards, you can definitely tell them a little bit about it. We also have a little bit of a technology issue, so I was hoping to share my screen, but I'm on the wrong computer. But we also have these great communication templates that we've developed that provide some examples of how, as an applicant, you can check in with a postdoctoral program, language you can use for accepting or declining, language you can use for explaining to a program who's not participating in the standards, about what the selection standards are. So there's some great information on there that I encourage you to look at. They are in the reference links that Joel sent out, but I do want to draw your attention to those. And one other thing, our offers binding. The postdoc selection process results in what is considered a professionally binding agreement between the training program and the applicant. The expectation is that when you accept a postdoc position, that you do withdraw from other positions that you may be seeking, and it would be considered really highly unusual to withdraw after you've made a commitment to a postdoc program. And I'm going to pause here. I could go on and on about the common hold date and the intricacies of it, but want to make sure there's room for lots of other questions as well. So I'm going to turn it back to you, Jamylah.
Great. So there were a couple of questions about the common hold date that came up in the chat, and you wouldn't have seen them because you were waxing poetic. Let me see if I can find one of them. Here we go. Just to clarify, if we receive an offer from for a postdoc, we have to accept or decline / hold within 24 hours, or we just have to confirm receipt of the email within 24 hours.
I think you want to provide an answer about what your plans are. And if you can't accept or decline, you can hold, because holding is basically buying time. That would be, if you're not sure of what you want to do, I would then hold off, if that makes sense.
Awesome. And then a couple of people are saying they can't reference the document that Dr. Schmidt uploaded. We are working on getting that accessible to everybody, so have no fear.
Oh yeah.
You were seeing.
Thanks, Jamylah. And what I'll do is I'll loop back with the panelists, and I've already downloaded the 3 files that Dr. Schmidt put on the chat, and I'll make sure to send those out to the registered panelists. So any file or links that the panelists would want me to forward on to our users, let me know, and I'll send those hopefully today.
Perfect, perfect. All right, so I think we've addressed all the questions that are in the chat.
I think there was one more that got tagged to a different question. There was a question about having a postdoc. Can it influence your pay grade or your step of pay grade that you're eligible for on the GS pay scale?
Oh, that's a great one. That's a great one. So having the postdoc in and of itself doesn't influence it. what influences your pay grade really is the years of experience. So coming out of internship and getting a job right away would put you at the GS 11 level, and you would stay at that level for a year before you would automatically go to the GS 12 level. After that second year, if you have obtained a license, then you'll automatically go up to the GS 13 level, and that's what we call the journeyman level. So that's kind of where you stay unless you move into a different type of role. If you do a postdoc is a year long. So at the end of the postdoc, you will have that year of experience that you would have gotten had you gone straight into a job. So you would start a job typically at a GS 12 level, unless you've done a neuropsych postdoc or a 2-year postdoc, in which case you would have enough to start at the GS 13 level if you are licensed. You can only be at the GS 13 level if you are licensed. But yeah, so it's the time that impacts what GS level you start with. If you have 0 experience after you've completed your doctorate, you start at the 11. If you have 1 year's experience, you start at the 12.
One of the questions that came through that Madeleine just answered was if folks don't have specific VA practica or internship, could they be considered for a VA? And rightly so, Dr. Goodkind. We embrace bringing on all trainees into the VA. And not having had experience should not sway you from applying. I think one of the things that you want to consider, though, is it's important to have an interest in veteran perspectives and values. The VA is a huge healthcare system. It's very mission driven. We focus on training and research, but the main priority is providing healthcare to our American veterans. So if you can sort of talk about that in your cover letter, I think it would go a long way.
One of the questions that are kind of similar to that had come up and was addressed in the chat was around if you did a VA internship but you didn't do a VA postdoc, does that make you not competitive for VA positions? And so the thing that made me think about is if you do a VA internship or postdoc, any kind of VA training, you're actually eligible for direct hire, what we call direct hire, which means that if there is a job opening, you can be selected without the rigor of USA jobs and things like that too. So what I'd said in the chat in response was that really the focus is more on the experience. So let's say I did a VA internship and then I did a postdoc working in a community clinic that focused on anxiety. And then I applied for a staff position at VA working in an anxiety clinic. The fact that I spent a year working in an anxiety clinic, that counts, right? And so even though it's not direct VA experience, I think whomever was making the selection would really be more interested in, do you have experience working with patients who have anxiety, since that's what this job is all about, more so than, well, they didn't do a VA postdoc, so I'm not gonna consider them. Really, it's more about the experience. And I just wanted to highlight that. If in that example, because I'd done a VA internship, I could be hired much more quickly and efficiently because the VA has special privileges for hiring ex-trainees.
Someone asked a question about if you did a more generalist internship, would they be less likely to obtain a specialized postdoc? And one of the examples was neuropsychology. I can speak as a neuropsychologist. Generally speaking, for a 2-year specialty program, there is an expectation that you've had some exposure to the field and to the specialty. And the reason for that is training in a specialty is gradual. There's substantial fund of knowledge and clinical experience kind of required to build on. So you would probably be more competitive if you had practica training in neuropsychology and other types of experiences.
There was a question about if postdoc counts towards the 10 years needed for public service loan forgiveness. Yes, it absolutely does. And you just want to make sure that you've applied for the program so that you can get credit for those hours, but we certainly have always encouraged our trainees to do it, because even when it was connected to like the income-based repayment plan, because your income is so low as a trainee, oftentimes you'll have no payment, but that time still counts. So yes, your training years definitely count.
Can I flip back to the previous question just about specialization? And I completely agree with everything that Zoe said, particularly around neuropsych training. And would also say that we are in a position right now where there are way more postdoctoral positions than there are applicants. And so I think that depending on what your goals are for fellowship, we're at a time now where if you've had less experience in a particular area, neuropsych might really be the exception, but you've had some experience and can really speak towards wanting to gain that experience at postdoc, you may be more of a competitive applicant than you would have been in previous years, just because of the huge number of listings. And so I always encourage my trainees to apply and let them turn you down, rather than assuming that you would never be a good fit. You never know what the applicant pile is going to look like. And so if you have a shot, and you have the time, I would say submit your application. Neuro might be a little bit different, but for the rest of the specialty practice areas or for other postdoctoral areas, I would encourage you to give it a shot.
And be broad in your thinking. In neuropsychology, for example, programs often find folks who have health psychology backgrounds to be really competitive and ready because of the overlap of the medical knowledge. So, you don't have to be as narrow in focus. If you've got comparable experiences, they may not completely align. Consider throwing that out there, because it may be what the program is looking for.
I just wanted to make a comment, if I could, to kind of build on what everyone has said so far, the questions about fit and so forth. I think one of the big take-home messages is that we in VA really like to train people that will then come to work with us. And so whether you've done VA work before or not, it's really about like making the case, like this is why I'm interested in working with veterans and working in VA. And I think you can get a long ways if you kind of go in with that mindset, and at the same time showing that you understand what that means, right? So if you haven't worked in VA before, you should be really thoughtful about, is this the population I want to work with, and show some understanding of that. But I think you can get a lot of mileage out of that, because that's honestly what training directors are looking for, people that really want to come here. We like to train people that are going to do the things that are relevant to the mission that we're serving. So I would just say that very generally for everyone. If you think you wanted to work in VA, definitely apply. Doesn't matter if you've been here before or not. You can make the case. I think you can, you're really going to have a lot of opportunities.
Let's see, there was a question of targeting San Diego, lack of direct hire. So the one thing I will say about that is that it's a national initiative, so everybody can do it. Sometimes there is a disconnect between that department and HR about whether or not it can be done, where HR has been informed numerous times that this can happen. But I know we've certainly come up against that in Dallas and at other sites too, where the training director or the chief of psychology has to really lobby and remind them of these national stipulations. So I can't speak to what is happening specifically at San Diego, but I know that that is something that can happen at times. And that may be the frustration that you're experiencing.
Well, and let me say there's actually a national work group that is trying to break those log jams. So we have 2 full-time recruiters that are happy to reach out to HR people if they are not fully understanding of the benefits and the abilities to do these direct hires. So so just to let you know, I think, it's sometimes this happens, but definitely there's a facility by facility attempt to kind of help HR understand that. So there are people that are working on that. So I wouldn't give up. You might just need to reach back out again or ask for some help. But now, I guess one thing I'll say though, sometimes sites may get a lot of applicants for a job, and then they don't have to hire trainees. They may elect to hire people that are more that are more experienced. But I think if a facility wants to hire a trainee, there's really a lot of opportunity to do that. And sometimes they just need a little education to help them get through that process.
One of the questions, now we're coming up against the end of the hour, but if someone's interested in a postdoc but also open to jobs, this person wondered how might they discuss that in interviews when applying to the same site for both? Does anybody have a burning desire to address that? So I guess the way I would think about it is, and one of the other questions, one of the things they addressed was really working with a mentor or your training director to try to negotiate and get a sense of what it is you really want, because a postdoc and a job have two different objectives, goals, and depending on where you are in your life and what your personal and academic needs might be, determining which one you really want to pursue makes the most sense. And also the timing, if you're applying to both postdocs and jobs currently right now, then that's unusual versus in the spring, you determine that, I had applied for postdocs, I had aspiration, but my dream job just popped up in my dream location or who knows what. And so I really want to consider this other opportunity. I think it can be a challenge to justify doing them, but applying for both at the same time, at the same site. Because ultimately people are looking to fill a position, or whether it's a fellowship position or a job position, and it's hard for them to, I think, feel like you're really considering the postdoc if you're also applying for a job, and vice versa. So I think it's important to kind of clarify what your goals are and work with a mentor or your training director to try to figure out what's the best approach.
Hey, Dr. Jackson, I'm going to jump in here real quick because I know we're going to be running short on time, and I want to take the time to appreciate and thank again all of our panelists for joining us today. Really active chat. The questions keep coming. So wondering if there's anybody on the panel who would want to drop their contact information in the chat if folks wanted to follow up with you or one of the groups that you're a part of, if folks had any additional questions. We were able to share the files in the chat, so if you haven't had the opportunity to do that, make sure you go into the chat and download those files again. And again, just wanted to thank our panelists for the great the great support and also the great insight that you bring, really good engaging conversations, and hopes that this has helped some of our audience members get closer to making a decision to stick with VA and make the decision to continue to train and develop professionally with VA. I'm going to hand it over to Jeremy here, who's going to share with us a little bit of information regarding our upcoming webinars. And one of the ones that will be coming up actually this Friday is specific to Veterans Day. It's our Veterans Memorial Dedication Ceremony, where we're going to be talking about Native veterans and focusing in on the Native veteran population. So if you're interested in that, the flyer was sent out via email. I'm going to go ahead and also just drop in the chat the registration link for people to be able to access that if you're interested in joining us this coming Friday. We do know it's a day off for a lot of federal employees, but what better way than to spend Veterans Day by supporting our Native veterans. So Jeremy, on to you if you want to do some quick announcements regarding webinars.
Sure. Thank you so much for y'all attending. And as always, I really appreciate the panelists. Y'all do such a wonderful job of presenting. That being said, with Division 18 VA section, we generally try to have our webinars on the first Monday of the month around noon. And if there's a holiday, we try for that Friday at noon. That being said, our upcoming one in December is on the 5th at 12 o'clock Central. And that's going to be Unconscious Bias with Dr. Trujillo. And we have in January, we have Dr. Susanna Creech presenting on addressing the impact of PTSD on family functioning within organized healthcare. And then following that, we have Dr. Casey Taft presenting on intimate partner violence in February. And then again, with Dr. Trujillo, we have Latinx psychology coming up in March. So very much looking forward to y'all attending. If you have any questions, please email us at APA Division 18, or you can email the webinar committee at the address that you find on the flyers. So happy to help.
Thanks, Jeremy. With that, we will close out. So thank you all again. Best of luck to you in this process, and we'll see you again next time. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.